Hello everybody. Today we are going to factor by grouping. So I'm going to write grouping on the top of this. The other thing is, how do I know which method I'm going to use and when I factor? And we are going to talk about that more. But the major hint that I'm going to use grouping for this particular handout is that there are 4 terms. So I want to have 4 terms in my expression, like all of these guys here, when I go ahead and factor by grouping. Let's just jump in and start. So here's our first one. I'm going to do the first 4 on the slow slide, next 4 really fast, just so we can get through this handout. First guy, whenever I factor by grouping, I'm going to group my first 2 guys, leave that plus here, and group my second 2 guys. Maybe I can even do this. There it is. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a GCF, something common. I'm going to look for a common number, 2. I'm going to look for a common variable, B, and that's all that I can factor out of that. Well, when I pull out a 2, that's 3. See how that gets me back to 6? When I pull out a B, I have a B left inside, plus. When I pull out the entire term, remember it can't just be nothing because I have to be able to distribute to get back to my original, so I do need that 1 as a placeholder. I'm going to bring down this plus. Something common here is 5. Pull out the 5, and that's 3. B. Bring down my plus. Factor out the entire term, so I need that 1 as a placeholder so I can get back to my original. As I do this, maybe some of you already noticed, we have the same thing in parentheses. When you're factoring by grouping, this has to happen. If it doesn't, then either you can't factor by grouping or something's gone wrong. So let's assume for our purposes here in this class that if there are 4 terms and we're supposed to factor by grouping, if this doesn't happen, something's gone wrong and we want to go back and figure it out. But this is the same here. So now the way that I see this is that I have 2 things that I'm multiplying on the left, plus 1, which is the 5, and 2, these 2 things that I'm multiplying on the right. So I actually have the same factor on the left and the right. I'm going to be actually factoring that out, 3b plus 1. And once that's factored out, what's left here, parentheses, is 2b and a positive 5. It might be super weird the first time you do this, but you'll get used to it. This is your final answer. Next guy. We're going to move right over. Group your first 2, group your second 2. Something common. Pull out a 4, K. Divide out 4, pull out a K. Bring down your plus. Divide out 4, pull out a K. That's it. Bring down this plus sign. Look for something common from these guys. It looks like a 3. Divide out 3. There's 5. Remember your K. Plus. Divide out a 3, 4. Same factor on the left and right. So at this point, it's a common factor on the left and right sides here. Pull that out. The way I say it to myself is I kind of just write that once. 5k plus 4. And everything else goes in the other set of parentheses, 4k plus 3. If we multiply this out, you can multiply your firsts. Oh, sorry about the x. Let's fix that. Okay. Multiply your firsts, and that's 20k squared. There's your 20k squared. Multiply your outers, 15k. It's actually the third term, but that's okay. Multiply these inners, distribute that 4, 16k. There's that term. And you multiply the last numbers, and that's how you get the 12. So if you actually multiply this out, distribute, you get back to your original. So that's how you know that it's correct. Moving on to number 3. Factor by grouping. Group our first 2, group the second 2. Common here is a 5p, leaving us with 5p. Bring down the minus. Take out your whole term. There's a 1. Bring down my plus. Common here is a 3. Leaving you with 5p minus Pull out the entire term, placeholder of 1. Same thing here and here, so I write that once. 5p minus 1 and 5p plus 3 is your other factor. Okay, moving on. Here's this guy. Group your first two, group your last two. Pull out something common, that's a 3 and an n. Pull out the 3 or divide it out, pull out an n minus, entire term comes out and there's a 1. Over here, bring down my plus. Something common here is the 4. Divide out a 4, 4n minus entire term, placeholder of 1. It's the same. 4n minus 1 and 3n plus 4 is my other guy. So that is that factor. Okay, the next, guys, hopefully you kind of got the hang of that. I'm going to do with you also. If you want to pause and check, you can. Okay. So let's just do 5, 6, 7, and 8. Whoop. No common number. Sometimes that happens, so I'm just going to pull out an M. Okay, so hopefully we all got the same answers as we moved on to the rest of them. Sometimes I circle my answer. Looks like most of the time I forgot. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. Some of these videos are getting way too long, so I'm trying to move along if I can. I'm going to zoom in. We're going to take a look at this number 9 that I wrote in. I'm leaving it down here for a moment just so that you can see that it's the same as number 7. So look, I recopied this. The two middle terms, I switched. And then the last term is the same. So it's the same exact expression. So I will get the same exact answer, but what makes this one different is that finally I have a minus here in the middle of the problem. The first 8 problems, if you look, all of them have a plus smack dab in the middle, actually meaning that your third term is positive. What happens if your third term is not positive? It's going to happen here. It does change everything a little bit. Honestly, if I got this one, I would rewrite it and I would switch these two terms and I'd make it look like number 7. But we are going to do this one, having already done number 7, and we're going to check to make sure we get the same answer. Okay, so let's move along. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to group my first two, and when I do that, looks like I'm having an x that is common. I'm going to pull that out. Parentheses, 5x plus 3. And there it is. So feeling good so far. When I group my second two, I can't just put the parentheses here because that negative very specifically goes with that 25x. If I put parentheses here, then it's as if I'm supposed to distribute the negative and I'm not. So whenever there's a minus here, we do plus negative. And then remember that you have to undistribute or factor that negative out immediately. That negative comes right back out. Look for a common number, and it's 5. If you divide negative 5 out of here, the negative comes out, so does the 5. If you divide a negative 5 out of here, plus 3. Now, they are exactly the same. And now we're going to get our first factor, or whichever factor. One of them is this, and the other one is x minus 5. And I still have it up here so that we can still see and compare. That's the tricky part, and that's what you have to do. Okay, so that's what happens there. Number 10. Number 10 is a rewrite of number 1. So if you glance up at number 1, yeah, 6b squared. I swapped these two middle guys. We'll see why in a moment. And then here's number 5. So these 3 problems down the bottom that you see, there's a little twist to them. So we kind of got the whole feel for factoring by grouping with the first 8. And now we're going to switch it up with these last guys. Okay, so let's see what happens here with number 10. So for number 10, I'm going to find something common for the first 2, which would be, let's see, I could do the parentheses, right, because that's a plus. So that's going to be a 3b that I'm factoring out. 2b plus, take out the 3, take out a b. Okay, that's good. Bring down my plus sign. And there's nothing common here that I can factor out. And I'm noticing that these are the same. So you know what, rewrite this in the parentheses, whoops, 2b plus 5. And if there's nothing common to factor out, put a 1 as a placeholder. So now that we can rewrite this common term, 2b plus 5, the outsides of your parentheses would be 3b plus 1. And if you glance up at number 1, that's exactly what you have for your answer for number 1. Okay, maybe in a different order, doesn't matter, but it is 3b plus 1. All right. Number 11. Number 11 is a combo of 9 and 10. So I put this one together so that we could practice what we just learned in numbers 9 and 10. First things first, I'm going to group my first 2 and pull out something common, and that's going to be a 2x. Take out a 2x, and I'll have 3x minus 4. Now I have to group these 2, but notice that minus sign. I wasn't able to do a little switch in the middle because they're both minus, so whatevs. So what I'm going to do is plus a negative. As soon as I do that plus and negative, I know that negative has to come right back out. Okay. Now I'm looking for something common here, and there isn't something common, but it's pretty similar to this. Well, let's see what happens when I do factor out or divide out this negative 1. Take out the negative, 3x. I have to take a negative out of this, divide by negative 1. Well, positive divided by a negative would give me a negative 4. And let's double check that if I distribute negative times a negative positive 4, that's how you get back to your original. And these guys match up pretty nicely. So I have my 3x minus 4 and 2x minus, oh, see, when you don't write something there, it gets a little confusing. Remember, placeholder of 1, minus 1. Double check real quick. This times this, that's your 6x squared. Positive times a negative, that's negative 3x. There it is. That's the negative 3x. Negative times a positive, that's negative 8x, right there in the middle. Negative times a negative is positive 4. And there it is. And that's how to factor by grouping.